All right, well, thanks for joining, everybody. My name is Todd Blankenbeckler, president of EasyRx. We got Andy Stark here also, the president of Genmar. And today's webinar, we're going to focus on EasyRx 3D editing like never before. And really the intent of this webinar is to introduce you to the 3D software that part of EasyRx, which means it's now part of Genmar. I'm going to spend most of my time in the software, running through it. There's not a lot of people on the webinar, so feel free to unmute and ask questions along the way. And we'll just give you guys a nice introduction. I've got just a couple of slides just to serve as an introduction. So EasyRx 3D, this is software that we've integrated into the workflow of EasyRx, and it is designed to allow you to base an STL model for printing in really quickly, we say in under 2 minutes. So this is just really nice, simple, fast, cloud-based basing software. We're not trying to, EasyRx 3D is not a, you don't design crowns or bridges, or you do aligner planning in EasyRx 3D. So that's done in other software. But if you just need to base your models for printing, that's what you would use EasyRx 3D for. We think it's pretty simple, so we can train staff pretty easily. It's cloud-based, so you don't have to install any software. So anywhere you can get on the internet, runs in Chrome, Firefox, or Safari. We probably lean towards Chrome or Firefox, but it'll run in Safari. We think it's going to be fine with Edge also, the new version of Edge. We're testing that. What it can do, here's just a little bullet list of what it can do, if I can get my mouse to cooperate. So number one, you're going to trim the models. We got a couple ways to do that. I'll show you. You can create regular or hollow-based models. We can add a chamfer. We can do angled bases, embossed or engraved. Sorry for the typo labels. We have an artifact removal tool to kind of get rid of that noise that happens with when the scanner is moved ever so slightly while they're scanning the patient and you get a little noise. We can get rid of that if they don't get that removed. I know iTero recently enhanced their process where they're doing some pretty cool artifact removal, but you're going to deal with that. If you are getting some cases in from orthodontic practices with brackets on the teeth, we can remove brackets now. And we have some refinement tools, build card, smooth, margin, block out, and cut out. And I'll introduce all of those in this webinar. So again, all of these are just to get the model based so you can get it printed and make whatever needs to be made to get the prescription completed. And it's really all part of our whole platform, the EasyRx, digital workflow platform, to connect practices and labs, to facilitate getting prescriptions and digital files from the practice to the labs that need to do the work. And a lab is, that term is fairly general. That can be design centers, that could be in-house labs, it could be manufacturers. So we kind of refer to them as labs, but that could mean any number of different types of businesses that are receiving prescriptions. So that's enough of a PowerPoint, maybe to, a little bit of an overview. So let me jump out. And so I'm going to log into EasyRx just because that's where I want to show you that workflow. If you are using VisualDLP, you can get to EasyRx 3D from VisualDLP simply by opening the STL file and your license for EasyRx 3D. So it's a very simple workflow. So I'm going to log in as a lab. And so kind of the first step of the process to get to or to use EasyRx 3D is you have to get the STL files. And there are a couple ways that you can do that. Number one is if a practice sends you a prescription, and they attach the STL files. Like I'm going to open up this prescription. So here's a prescription for a 3-unit bridge. And then if I scroll down, I see there are a couple STL files here, and I've attached 2 different ones. So I want to show you a couple different things. So from here, I can click and I can go right into EasyRx 3D. And this would be the same experience if you're in VisualDLP. You're simply going to click and open up, and here's an STL file. And I'll come back to this. So kind of the workflow could be, I'm going to check in this case to acknowledge to the practice that you've started working on the prescription. And then, okay, now I need to base this model. I go click and boom, I'm going to open up the file in EasyRx 3D. So let's go put a base on this so you can see how that works. And I'll show you a couple of things. So number one, I mentioned artifact removal. So this particular model is a pretty large artifact hanging off. So before we base the model, we really want to get rid of this. So let's do that. So step one, anytime you're going to work with a model, you always orient. That's pretty common in CAD software. So I'm going to orient this model. And then before I start to trim this model, I want to get rid of that little artifact. And so on the right side of the screen, I'm going to click Highlight Artifact. And I don't have to do the whole thing. It's sort of connecting right there. So I'm holding down the Shift key and left mouse button. And I'm going to see if I can get that artifact removed off. Now I'll cut off a little bit of the tooth there. I would, if you wanted to protect that part for the appliance, I could have been a little more careful with my marking, but you get the idea. So now that artifact has been removed. So now let's go trim this model. So I'm going to click Easy Model Trim. And with Easy Model Trim, I can draw a trim path. And I'm just going to do a horseshoe model. So what I'm doing is I'm holding down the Shift key and left mouse button. And I'm drawing around. I'm going to go ahead and move up in here. And I'm just drawing around the model. And once you do this 2 or 3 times, you get pretty good at this. Then you can come back and adjust the position of these models. And then I'm going to click Trim Model. And that's going to trim that model. If it has trouble, the scan has a couple problem areas. It's going to show those trouble areas in red dots. This model was able to be trimmed successfully. So I've now trimmed this model, and pretty simple to do. And then I can go over and I can do a couple options on my bases. I'll put maybe I'll put a regular base on this. I'm going to do a 2 millimeter base height, and I'm going to click Add Base. My mouse cooperates, and this is going to add the base. And then it isn't a requirement to trim, then add the base. You can mark the trim path and then set your base options and do it all in one step. But anyway, so there's a regular base, and those yellow panels that you're seeing, that part of the model is a little thin. So if you were going to put your label on the bottom of the model, we would want you to avoid that yellow area. So that's just saying, we don't want you to put an engraved label in that yellow area. So let's go ahead and add the label so you can see what that looks like. So down at the bottom, under Add Label, we've got some default text options. The most common is the patient's name. You can add the practice name if you would like to. You can type in some custom text, but I'm going to do patient name, and I'm going to pick an engraved label, and we've got a couple different label font sizes. I'll start with regular, and you just position the pointers where you want the label to go. And then you can kind of move that around as needed. And then you click Add Label, and that's going to add the label to the model. And there's an engraved label. And if I did that on the bottom of the model, we just wouldn't want to put the label on the yellow part. Now let me go to Add Label, and I will undo that. And this time, I'm going to pick a larger label, and I'm going to emboss this label. And so we can do a little larger label. And then we have auto. And auto is you want to control the size. So as you adjust the pointers, the label is going to change in size. So if you want a really big label, you would just adjust those out and you would get a nice size label. Something else you can do, each model can have 2 labels. So if you wanted to, I could go down and uncustom text. We see this some with clear aligner, and other text I put 5. And I could go here and put a 5, say, on the side of a tooth. And this may indicate the aligner number for the patient. And so they get 5 aligners, and they see number 5 on the side of the aligner, and they know this is the 5th one. So each model can have up to 2 labels. The other thing we can do is you can, like I could click patient name, practice name, combine those. So there's a nice little 5 on the side of the label. So that was real quickly the artifact removal and using our process called Easy Model Trim. Let me show you a couple other options. I'm going to close this model, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to grab another model that has some brackets on it. So you can see brag removal, and you can see some of the refinement tools. And I also want to use a feature called Easy Model Trim. So again, so here's another model. Got this up. I'm going to orient this model like you always do. And then after orienting, instead of using Easy Model Trim, I'm going to use, how about that? I'm going to use Easy Base. So Easy Base, it's going to add a horizontal cutting plane. And so this is just a little cutting plane that you can move up. So maybe you just want to real quickly set your horizontal cutting plane to that. And then I'm going to go down. I'm going to say I want to do a hollow model, thinnest base height, 2.5 millimeter wall thickness. And I'm not going to add drain holes, but I'm going to chamfer the base, which is going to be a little notch on the back, which just makes it easy to pop the model off the build plate once it's done being printed. And so in one step, it's going to trim and add the base. And, you know, this may take, I don't know, 10, 15 seconds, hopefully not much longer. We are in the cloud, right? So what's nice is as this is doing its thing, if you need to, I can hop back over, you know, do some work over here and come back when this guy finishes. So it is nice. You can open multiple tabs. We don't recommend a whole bunch of tabs, but you could have 2 or 3 models open at the same time. Most everyone tends to just work with one model at a time. So there's a nice little trimmed model. It's hollow on the inside. And you can see on the back, see how this angle, the back of the model is angled. So just to help you pop that off the model. Now, something else you can do is I can also do a vertical cutting plane. So if you like if it would cooperate for me. Let me undo add base. Let me go back. If you like, well, just not cooperating for me. Click. Let me go back to that. We'll just start over and see if that fixes it. So I could also position a cutting plane. Well, that's just not cooperating. But we can do a vertical cutting plane where you can cut off the back of the model and print the model vertically if you would like, if that little guy was cooperating. So let me go back and put my base back on my model. So I'll do same steps, chamfer, 2.5 millimeter. Go ahead and add this base. Let me go back and do that again. Then this will take another, 20, look like this one took, 20, 25 seconds or so. And then just so you can see it, I'm going to show you how to do brag removal and then maybe use some of these refinement tools over on the left side. So we'll let this finish basing. While we're waiting for this to base, since it's a pretty small group, I will see if there are any questions out there. All right. There we go. So there's a nice little horseshoe hollow model. So let's show you brag removal just so you know that it's out there. So this model has brackets on it. So I'm going to go over under bracket removal. I'm going to choose select brackets. And I'm just going to draw around the bracket and click remove bracket. And that's going to erase the bracket from the model. And you'll notice I'm moving away from the bracket. You don't want to touch any of the bracket pad or bracket glue. And then, so just to show you a couple of the refinement tools, maybe in this area, there's a little bit of an indentation. So I could go over here and maybe I want to pick build, which is going to add material. And I can go here and add some material there. I did that larger just so you could see it visually. And then I'm going to click smooth. Oh, I did margin, excuse me. Undo last refinement. I'm going to pick smooth. And I could smooth the edge of that. So do something like that to kind of smooth that around. I was able to add a little to surface, get that nice and clean. Now let's go back and look at a bracket that's up in the gum line so you can see a couple options. So number one, let me go back to brag removal. I'm going to click select bracket. And I'm going to draw around the bracket. Again, I don't want to touch any of the bracket pad or any of the glue that's hanging out there. I'm going to remove bracket. And because the bracket went up into the gum line, I now have a margin that isn't very distinguished. So I'm going to pick the margin tool. And for every refinement tool, we give you a couple of slider bars to set the size and to set the depth. And so this is the default size is 0.20 millimeters, which means the width of the margin is going to be set to 20 millimeters. The depth is going to be 0.3. So you can see what that looks like. I'm just going to kind of carve in the margin. So do something like that. And then maybe you could go back, you want to smooth that up a little bit. So I'm going to pick the smoothing tool, and I'm holding down the shift key and left mouse button. I could smooth in the margin, something like that. And maybe that one little area I'm not real pleased with. I'm just going to tweak that a hair and then go back, click smooth, and get that smoothed in a little bit. So you get the idea on how to set the margin. So let's walk through each of these refinement tools. I've already used build, which is going to build up the surface. So to walk you through build, build's going to build up the surface. And if I make that a little bigger, you're going to get something like that. And so there are a number of reasons you would need to build the surface, just to get the model ready to make whatever appliance you're going to need to make. Carve would be the opposite of build, which is it's going to remove the two surface. So it's going to do something like that. Again, you can change the width and the depth to make some bigger cuts. And smooth, as I've shown a couple of times, smooth is going to smooth the surface that you touch. Well, I've shown you margin. Now blockout's very similar to build, and this isn't a great model to show this on. In fact, let me go get another model to show build, and let me go back. Let me go grab another model. I'm going to go down to my checked in cases, and I'm going to get, I'll get this case. I also want to point out something so this is a case that came in, and you'll see there's a lower, and then there's a lower that says EasyRx optimized, and there's an upper, and there's a file upper EasyRx optimized. When scans are uploaded to EasyRx, either via a prescription or if you just upload them to your account, EasyRx automatically optimizes the scans, which means we just clean up the scan to prepare it for work at EasyRx 3D, so you have a better, experience, and to prepare for 3D printing. Now you can work with the originals. We always recommend if the optimized is available, use the optimized. We don't change anything with the data. We're just cleaning up the surface. So here's another model, and I want to show block out and cut out. So I'm going to orient this model. Like you always do. And let me go ahead and base this guy. So I'm going to pick easy model base. I'm going to drag that up. Make sure that's in good shape. Do a hollow base, 2 millimeter base height. Add the base. So we'll let the base add. And then I will hop over and show you guys block out and cut out in a moment. And then I'll finish by showing you how maybe you only need to print 3 units of the model. I'll show you how you can trim the model where you only get 2 or 3 teeth. I'll let this guy finish basing. Hopefully not too much longer. Again, while this is running, I can hop over here. Looks like it's about finished. There we go. All right, so block out, to show you that. Let me get that set. So maybe there's a need for the appliance that you're making where you want to, we see this a lot with lingual retainers, but you want to draw just a little bit of a block out there to there. So as you're making the appliance, it's going to fit properly when it gets to the patient. And so block out just gives you that flexibility to do that. And, I can make this guy, I can make the block out, bigger if needed, just by adjusting the slider. So you can do something like that. And then cut out, maybe up on the front, you want to do something like this right here. That would allow you to cut out and make that a little bit more, so you can make that. I'll make it a little bigger just so you can see what you could do. I'm going to go cut out a little bit of this area here, so you can cut out that part of the model. So all these refinement tools just give you some flexibility to edit models. You guys probably work with 3D models a lot, and you know that there's always some cleanup that needs to be done. Let me close this model one more time because I've already oriented and based it. And let me reopen it. And maybe you get a prescription in and you don't want to print the whole model. You only want to print a quadrant of the model. So I'm going to, again, open up the model like we always do, orient the model. So let's say I just want to do a 3-unit model. So when I go to orient, instead of doing molar, interior molar, I'm going to set my orient point something like this, right? I'm still drawing a triangle. It's just a much smaller triangle. And then I'm going to use Easy Model Trim. And I'm just going to trim around the teeth that I wish to print. Again, left shift and left mouse key to draw your trim path. Trim path turns green when it's complete. You can then adjust these. And then I'm going to go over and trim the model. And so instead of trimming where I leave the whole model, there's just a nice little 3-unit. And I want to make a point, and this applies to every model that's trimmed. When you choose your base height, and we have some default settings, we also have a custom base height setting. The base height is determined by the lowest trim point. So what I mean by that, this really gives you some flexibility to set your base height. So if I go around and I move these trim points close to the teeth, but I have this one trim point, say down here, this point is going to become the marker to determine my base height. So if I say 2 millimeter base height, it's going to set the base height 2 millimeters from this trim point. So as you're trimming the model, you just want to make sure you have those trim points, I call it high, close to the teeth, because the lowest one's going to set your base height. So I've got the trim path set. I'll pick 2 millimeter base height. I'm going to do since that's small, I probably need to do regular. And I'm going to click Add Base. Again, in one step, it's going to trim and then add the base. So there's a nice little 3-unit. Again, you could add a label. Add that label. And then you're going to save it. We give it a default file name that's going to save the model. All the models are going to be saved back to your EasyRx Genmar account. So they're going to be stored in the cloud. So we're going to back them up for you. They're stored encrypted. And now you could, we got this in EasyRx 3D. We have View STL Print List, which is going to show the models that need to be printed or that have been printed. So this is a really simple way to track which models need to be printed. So here are all of my STL files. I have the option to only show EasyRx 3D base models displayed. If I uncheck that, I get a whole bunch of files. So I just want to see the models I based. I click that. And then there's a column, printed. So as you print models, you mark them as printed. So then you can only show models that are printed. And I can do click, click, click. And if you are using a 3D printer that we have an integration with, and we integrate with Form, SprintRay, EnvisionTech, I don't have it enabled, but 3D Systems, Minecraft, you can send these files right to your 3D printer just to facilitate the process of opening the STL files in your 3D printer. If you're not using a printer that we don't have an integration with, that's perfectly okay. We've developed a program that runs in your browser called EasyRx, which is a secure access to your base models. So if you're using Carbon or something else, then you would access your models from your 3D printer software through EasyRx. So it's very simple to do that. But I print my 3 models. They all look good. When you finish printing them, you come back here. You can mark those as printed. And now you know which models you printed and which models need to be printed. What's nice about this, our platform, is you can base models from anywhere. And when you save the models, they're available from wherever you log into your account. So you can work from home, base all your models, and then come in the next day, open up EasyRx 3D or Genmar VisualDLP at the lab, and then all your models will be there. Or you can work in the back office basing models and go to your, where your printer is to do the printing of the models. So the platform is really flexible just on access. All right, so I've been going 35 minutes, which is probably plenty. So I've really, gone through everything that I wanted to show. So I will, I'll open it up for questions, see if we have any questions. All right, well, I will finish with pricing. So EasyRx is a subscription-based model. So it comes in EasyRx 3D is in EasyRx Lab, either our standard plan or the enterprise plan. If you want access to EasyRx 3D, it's $99 a month. So we just bill you monthly. That includes the ability to base model, trim base, label models, artifact removal. If you do need to remove brackets, there's a one-time fee of $495 to enable bracket removal. And then you just pay per patient that you remove brackets from, because not every lab needs access to bracket removal, so we do make it an option. But if you just want to access EasyRx 3D to access the editing capabilities, it's $99 a month. We just bill that monthly. There's no contract. So you can cancel anytime. So it's very simple. The 99, excuse me, includes training on using EasyRx 3D. So really everything that I went through today, we would go through with you in a dedicated training session. And it includes support, and support's available, regular business hours. We, phone, chat, email. So you get the software, you get training, and you get support for $99 a month. All right. Well, I will throw it out there one more time and see if there are any questions. All right. Well, thanks very much for joining and listening in. And let's hope you have a good rest of the day and everybody stays busy. Thank you.